Cancer Book Club for October of 2020, this wonderful year. And today I'm happy to introduce Chris Joseph, who has defeated pancreatic cancer and has written a book about it. And he's an extraordinary book, an extraordinary journey. And we're really pleased to have you with us today, Chris, to talk about what you've done and how you're doing now, and about the book. Because I'll see that what struck me, the book, you say in the book that you started sort of preparing it in March. That was only months ago. That was when the pandemic was declared, right? So basically 8 months. That's amazing to go from eight months to a book, a published book, self-published, but still a book. That's what really was impressive to me, that you're the first writer we've interviewed whose book was written under COVID times.
Wow.
So everybody else, their cancers were long before. So that was another important aspect of the book for me, is that in the end, where you talk about COVID as a threat and how it affects the whole world, and how it influences cancer patients and your own, all of us, the whole world, and cancer patients. Anyway, I'll stop there. I know I was kind of starting off with my impressions. So, Chris, maybe you could just, for the sake of people who haven't read your book but would like to, just a brief summary to kind of overview what takes place in the book and what people are in for.
First of all, thanks for having me on. It's nice to not only be talking to you guys, but also there aren't too many 4-year third stage pancreatic cancer survivors. And I don't even call it surviving anymore. I call it thriving. So the reason I wrote the book, and I'll give you the short version of this, after about the first year of my treatment, for the first few months, I wasn't doing well. We can talk about that. Once I changed
conventional chemotherapy.
Yes. Once I decided I didn't like the approach I was doing and sort of took matters into my own hands, and I started doing better. And then over the last 2 to 3 years, I started getting a lot of calls from people asking me what I had done, because surviving pancreatic cancer is a rare thing. And I realized, wow, I have a pretty good story here. And as much as I like talking to people, and I'm talking to more people than ever, who want to know what I did, which is great that I'm able to talk to them. But I thought, okay, I'm going to write a book. And I had never written a book before, so I had no idea what that entailed. So, but yeah, I started writing it in March and finished it a few months later. I was just driven. I felt like I had to write it. I had to write it. Not necessarily for other people, but for me and for my kids and for my girlfriend. Just to get it out of my system. So the short version of what I've gone through is that in October 2016, 4 years ago this month, I was shockingly diagnosed with third stage pancreatic cancer. It was the worst day ever. Hearing that news totally took me by surprise. And I thought I was going to be dead within a few months. When you hear pancreatic cancer, it's the go-to, one of the two go-to cancers that screenwriters use to write out characters, the other being breast cancer.
Yeah, they did that on The Affair.
They did do it on The Affair, yes, and that's why I stopped watching it, because I could not. I thought, I know what's going to happen here.
No.
Right, it didn't end well. So the first few months were rocky and never physically painful. I never really had a lot of physical pain, but emotionally very, very rocky, and tons of fear. And I really did think I was going to die. I was on chemotherapy for a few months, and that wasn't going well. The chemotherapy wasn't working. I was misdiagnosed, which we can also talk about. I just decided I'd had enough of chemo because it was killing me. The chemo was killing me, not the cancer. And I have nothing against any Western medicine, chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. I've seen that it helps people. So I'm just talking about my personal story. I'm not here to say Western versus Eastern or natural, or
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
everyone has to find what works for them.
And also, if I recall correctly, you didn't have a genetic sort of biomarker assessment of your satellite microsatellite status until well into it. So you were getting essentially given the wrong, no
I was
wonder you
good.
suffered
Yes,
horribly with chemotherapy. You could have gone straight to immunotherapy and
correct. Correct.
been
Yeah, I
better
was.
off if they'd done that, if they'd done their work up front, which they didn't do. And I hope they do now, but didn't do for you.
I don't know what they. All I know is my own experience. I know a couple cancer patients I've talked to, a few that I've talked to have gotten genetic markers tested early on, and some haven't. So I don't. I think 10 years from now, 20 years from now, everyone will get that. But I think right now it's sort of hit or miss as to
But
who
this
gets that.
question of MSI, high MSI stable separates the sheep from the goats in terms of what can work.
For
So
my yes, for my yes. I mean, I
you're,
think, and again,
mine too.
I'm so not an expert in this. I'm an expert with my own experience, but
Yeah,
I'm not an expert in cancer or treatment. I think there are many different kind of genetic anomalies when it comes to cancer. Again, which I'm just learning, but I think there's a wide array of genetic tests that can be done, not just for MSI.
yes, sir.
Um, but I definitely recommend to people who are, when they're first diagnosed, to talk to their caregivers about their primary physicians about what kind of tests can be done to delineate with more specificity what kind of cancer they have and the treatment options. Yeah, what you just said a minute ago would have been great. It would have been great if I had gone right to immunotherapy. That would have helped a lot, but that's not what
Sure.
happened.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the route that you did take.
I'm sorry, ask me that again.
Tell us a little bit about the route that you did take, going from traditional chemotherapy where you were misdiagnosed over to Germany and back.
So when I was misdiagnosed, when I wasn't doing well on chemo, there was one night in March of 2017 where I was taken to the hospital here at UCLA in Santa Monica, and I thought I wasn't coming out. I thought I was done. I'd live a few more days and that would be it. And then obviously that didn't turn out to be correct. And what I was going through severe panic and fear, and that's really what was going on in my head at that time. But what did come out of that, the next day I was supposed to go in for another chemotherapy session. I told my girlfriend, I'm not going.
Yeah.
I'm done. And it wasn't, I can smile about it now. Back then it wasn't a well thought out plan. It wasn't like I'm going to stop chemotherapy and then I'll do A, B, and C. I just knew at that point I was going to stop
Yeah.
chemotherapy.
Yeah.
I figured, okay, if I'm going to die, I'd rather die of cancer than chemo. But it turned out to be the best day because it opened up any number of possibilities. I didn't want to die, obviously, but I realized, okay, there are options out there, both Western medicine and non-Western medicine, that I had not been exposed to. And I started doing a lot of research and talking to people and looking at various clinics around the world. And I wound up doing alternative, natural, what I call two different kinds of immunotherapy: natural immunotherapy and Western medicine immunotherapy. And I did both. I did natural immunotherapy here in the United States, here in Los Angeles. I went to Germany for 3 weeks in 2017 and did some more. Then I came back here in LA, did some more after that. And then the FDA just approved Keytruda Western medicine immunotherapy for my rare type of cancer. And I started doing that, and I did that for 2 years. So let me back up. I did do chemo, as I discussed. I wasn't a candidate for surgery or radiation, given the location of my tumor. So to this day, I don't really know what helped. I think it all helped. I think both forms of immunotherapy, both the natural and the Western medicine, really helped me. And that's why I'm not in any one camp or another. I think I got the benefit of both. I really do.
Has this experience changed the way you see life?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Take a deep breath.
Yeah. No, it has. It's funny. I was asked that question a lot early on, early on, I don't think I had I think the answer would have been no, that it didn't change me. But now, having 4 years into this, I think it has. Yeah, I think it's humbled me. I think it's made me more grateful. I mean, I can forget to be grateful all the time, but usually at least once a day, where I remember, wow, I'm pretty lucky. Or wow, isn't it amazing to still be here? Or maybe taking less for granted. Um, Maybe being more. I think it's changed me. I'm more connected with. I have two teenage kids. Um, More connected with my girlfriend. More able to appreciate her smile. Yeah, it's changed me. I mean, I wish I didn't have to go through this, but a lot of the changes have been good.
Yeah, I noticed in your book you quoted Nurse Lindsay, who has that wonderful essay
Mm.
on her perceptual shift of the cancer experience from a
Hmm.
professional to an actual patient. What made you decide to include that in the book?
So a friend of mine who had gone through breast cancer found that column by Nurse Lindsay and sent it to me early on, like 2 months into my journey. This might make me start to cry, but this is part of the changes that I've gone through the last 4 years, is that I do cry a lot. When I read the Nurse Lindsay column, I felt less alone. I felt less alone, and I think unless you go through cancer, or you've been living with someone with cancer, which is a lot of people, there's not really a true understanding of what one goes through. And the Nurse Lindsay piece was like, wow, okay, she gets it. She gets me. She doesn't even know me, but she gets me. She gets that I'm flailing. She gets that don't know what to do, that I'm scared. So when it came time to write the book, I thought, um, reading that was a part of my journey, and it helped me. So I thought, okay, if her column helped me, maybe it can help other people too. And keep in
Another
mind, I've never spoken to her in my life. She probably doesn't know that I've included her column in my book.
another person that you referenced in the book that Pat and I have interviewed for this For Cancer Book Club was yoga, the warrior pose. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Brad
and
Willis.
yes, and I've read, of course, we read that and we interviewed him, and that was super interesting. And you know what I remember reading when I read his book, I was struck by just how Herculean the effort was that he was doing, like getting up at 5 every morning and yogaing for hours and hours, which seems really kind of out of reach of a lot of people. But you did reference him as an inspiration, as someone who made massive lifestyle changes and resulted in
What do you
better
think the
outcomes.
most
Yeah.
profound effect Brad had on you was?
Ask me again.
What was most profound impact that Brad had on you? Because having somebody who has been through something like that as a coach is just phenomenal. He's a phenomenal person. Um, what did that, yeah.
I guess there's a few parts to my response. One, I agree with you. He's a phenomenal human. He really, really helped me a lot. As you know, he wrote the foreword to the book. When I read his book, which I read before I was diagnosed, just coincidentally, um, I was so struck by his determination and his grit and his curiosity and his intelligence, his thoughtfulness, his drive to stick around for his then young son.
Teenage boy now.
What's that? Say again?
He's a young man now. He's lived so
Yeah,
long.
yeah, I've seen him on
Two.
social
Started
media.
with two.
He's in his early 20s now. Brad's book is such an inspiration. And so when I had the opportunity, a mutual friend just coincidentally said, hey, I know this guy, Brad Willis, who wrote this book, Warrior Pose. Maybe he can help you. I said, yeah, I read Warrior Pose. Yeah, let's connect them to me. And one thing led to another. And we started doing FaceTime calls once a week. I went down to Coronado where Brad lives for an afternoon in, I think, May or so of 2017. Yeah, he's a true inspiration. And what it gave to me was, this can be done. There's no guarantee, and there still isn't any guarantee. I could die tomorrow, but to me it was a lesson in making the effort, and learning how to live, learning how to survive, learning how to thrive. So yeah, he's a true inspiration. He really is.
There was a Dr. Gonzalez in your book, I believe,
Hmm.
and you
Hmm.
mentioned two things that he brought up that I found really interesting. And they were the myth of authenticity and the myth of credentials.
Yeah. By the way, I should let you know that I'm the type that could walk out of a movie or read a book and I forget everything instantly. There's some people who can remember dialogue for years. Um, so of course I never met Dr. Gonzalez. I wrote about him, and I tried to get into his clinic with the doctor who was running the clinic after Dr. Gonzalez died. Um, I think what Dr. Gonzalez was trying to say is, just because they have a doctor, before their name, doesn't make them gods. They're human, and they're doing their best. Most of them are doing their best, but that doesn't mean they get it right all the time. It doesn't mean they can't be questioned. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't be open to alternatives. I think, and I did this, I'm not on a soapbox here at all. I made this mistake, and I think a lot of people make this mistake, that when a doctor tells us something that we think it's gospel. And the reality is, it may be gospel, it may be, but it may not be. And I think it's our job as patients to ask questions of doctors, to get second and third opinions, to not put them on a pedestal, to not take what they say as gospel. So I do think when Dr. Gonzalez was saying there's some reasons why cancer patients die. I think that's what he was talking about, that we put people on pedestals. We panic. I know that was one of his 4 reasons as well. I never met him, as I said, and he passed away, I think, from heart disease. But I do have a close friend who went through his protocol and who's still around. And by all accounts, Gonzalez was a hero for a lot of cancer patients.
What was the most difficult part of writing this book? You did it so quickly that
Yeah.
it's almost like a consciousness dump, in a and I mean in a really great way. But
Right.
did you run into
Thank you.
any difficulties with that?
Yeah, I did. Writing it wasn't hard because I became obsessed. I mean, I actually took off to a mountain community here in California called Mammoth Lakes right at the start of the pandemic. And I was one of the very few people up there, other than people who live there. No vacationers were there. But I didn't go up there to vacation. I went up there to write. And yeah, to answer your question, it was hard reliving all that. I mean, every time I talk about when I started writing about the day I told my kids that I had cancer, it was just, maybe not just as hard, but almost as hard reliving that day. And there were so many points, especially early on in my journey, that I recounted in the book, that I, of course, I was writing about them. I thought, oh my God, that Christmas day in 2016, where I thought that was going to be the last Christmas I was going to be alive. Yeah, it was really hard. And then, of course, writing a book is writing it, but then you have to go through your own edits. And then I had 4 different editors. And so I had to go through that book 10 times maybe. And every time I was reliving my journey. It was really hard. And it's hard sometimes even now talking about that stuff with people. I was on a podcast, quick story, I was on a podcast a few weeks ago with 2 of the leading pancreatic cancer researchers in the country. And I didn't know what they were going to ask me. I mean, I don't really know what anyone is going to ask me in these interviews. I have a general idea now, but they said, "Can you recount the first day of when you got diagnosed?" And it caught me off guard, and I wasn't ready for it, and I started crying. So whether it's in writing the book or talking to people, yeah, I mean, maybe this goes back to what you asked me a few minutes ago about how this has changed me. We don't forget these painful experiences. I mean, it would be nice if we could, but we don't. And so whether it's writing about it or talking about it, reliving it is still difficult.
One of the things I found difficult about, or funny about writing a cancer book is, when you get to that editorial stage, you have to distance yourself from the text enough to actually see the errors that are in the grammar and the
Oh,
spelling. And so
sure.
on. So you're thinking, wait a second, how do you spell? What is the? I've got two periods after the word.
Yeah.
Oh, look, are there two T's in vomiting? Let me just look that up. So, you end up it's a weird meta level above your own disease
Absolutely, yes.
experience to have to kind of, well, I have to put that aside and think, now, do I put the verb before the noun in the sentence when I'm talking about, the Christmas day I told my kids. So
Yeah.
it really is a weird compartmentalization of.
It was. That's a great point. I also, when I wrote, I mean, everyone writes differently, I think. I was very intimidated because I don't consider myself to be a great writer, and I still don't consider myself to be a great writer. I knew I had a great story. And so what I had to learn in the writing process was to find my voice. And also, to your point, I actually didn't worry as much about the grammar and the typos. I just felt like, let me get this out of my system.
Yeah, you worry about the typos later. Get it down.
And then I can get through. I didn't want to get hung up on anything. I knew I wrote an outline and I just sat out and wrote it.
One of the things I found very refreshing about your books, compared to all the others not all of the others, but is how frank you were about the crying aspect and the emotional aspect. So many of our male writers are like, I'm Lance Armstrong, I'm a hero, I survived because I'm super strong. And you didn't kind of go that way in your book. You said, no, I was there. Suddenly my vulnerabilities came to the surface. I cried a lot. I guess you described yourself as sort of a sensitive little boy, and then you grew up to be a sensitive man. And so you describe, even now that there's still a lot of emotional distress that you're working through as a survivor. And I found that really refreshing as a reader to read about a man saying, you know what, man, it's okay. Like you have a whole thing. It's okay to cry your head off if you want, like that part. I thought was very permission giving to other males and then women too in terms of coping. So I thought that was
thank you. I'm trying to be careful in talking to people, especially now that the book is out, about I don't want to be the person who says you should do this or you should do that or do what I did, or that's not why I wrote the book. But I did want to tell my story, and I will say that I know that crying helped. It helped me. I don't know what it would do for other people, but it.
Yeah, and often we encounter people who say, I never cried. I didn't cried once, and I'm strong as an ox, and it didn't touch me. How could you possibly have that approach? It's just so unrealistic. So I found your book much more authentic than books.
Thank you. Again, I know that approach. First of all, that's not me anyway. But it wouldn't have worked for me. I think for me, it would have made things worse trying to keep things in.
Yeah. So I found that sort of I'm going to be fluid with my feelings, and I'm just going to let myself have the feelings I feel instead of trying to repress them and say I'm fantastic and strong and wonderful when I don't feel that way at all.
Yeah.
I thought that was so real, and the reality, the realness of it, I think, is super helpful to other patients who often are, as you know, many people are burned by have a positive attitude, 100% on 24/7. And so that's not realistic for.
It's not realistic, and it's funny. People were saying, "Oh, if you think negative, it's going to make things worse."
Exactly.
I have to tell you, I thought plenty negative stuff, and once in a while I still do. Once in a while, I still, some doubts will creep in, fears, or, I mean, that stuff doesn't go away. It's
And of
lessened
course,
for
we've
me,
all
but
seen the opposite with people say, "Oh, I've got a positive attitude," and they're dead in 2 months. So
right.
there's only so much attitude is going to do
I
for us.
totally agree. Yep. I totally agree.
You also bring up in your book COVID and cancer. How would you contrast the two experiences?
What I wrote in the book, and I meant it for me, I mean, I'm very mindful when it comes to COVID. I want to be respectful to others. So when I'm outside, I'm around people, I wear a mask. Um, Sometimes it's also for myself. It's not just for other people. But getting COVID, it's not that I want to get it. I certainly don't. But I was never really, I'm not really afraid of it. I felt like, man, after you get a third stage pancreatic cancer diagnosis, COVID is, I mean, COVID's horrible. But I felt like, okay, if I get it, I'm keeping myself healthy. I'm working out a lot every day. I'm eating right. I'm getting outside. I'm connecting with humans. I, I, I always felt that I got it, which I didn't, knock on wood so far, that I would be able to survive it. So, and I also felt like one of the lessons I learned in this journey was to take my health journey in my own hands. And a friend of mine who's a nutritionist said this to me a few weeks ago about COVID. She actually wrote this. She said, waiting around and doing nothing, waiting for a vaccine is not a very good wellness plan when it comes to COVID. Not to say that vaccines won't work. Of course they can, and they probably will, and that's a good thing. But there's so many things we can do while we're waiting. So many things we can do while we're waiting. We can walk, we can breathe, we can connect, we can get some fresh air, we can try and eat a little better, we can try and eat a little healthier, maybe try and eat a little less. So the other thing is I think that I'm not preaching, I'm giving you my beliefs that COVID has gone haywire in this country for any number of reasons, which I don't need to talk about. But this country is pretty unhealthy. And I think that's been a big reason also why we haven't done well. And I hope this is a wake-up call for all of us, just to see if we can get a little healthier, because this is not going to be the last virus. There's going to be others.
On Friday, I'll pass this on. On Friday, I was speaking to my oncologist, and he said when the first pandemic came out, they started doing, geez, our cancer patients are going to be they're going to be decimated and super vulnerable to this virus. And the early studies of people getting, who were dying within 2 weeks he said, if people survive that month, said the research is right now that he's getting is suggesting that non-immunocompromised cancer patients do not have worse survival with COVID, so that they can, you can, as a survivor of cancer, survive COVID, and you are not at increased risk relative to everybody else. If you're, you don't have neutropenia or some of the other, problems caused by acute cancer or chemotherapy. So what he seemed to be saying is that people who are survivors needn't be thinking that they're complete toast if they get
No,
COVID.
I had COVID back in February. I have numerous comorbidities. I am fine. And somebody said to me, what if you get it again? I said, I'll survive it again. I mean, right now in New Mexico, which is totally closed down, we have a 99.97% survival rate. Now that varies a little bit.
Who's in the 1% who aren't living? That's the
Yeah,
one.
but 1% die of, of the regular flu, of driving their cars, of everything else. And COVID is serious, and it's serious particularly for immunocompromised people and whatnot. But I think that one of the lessons I certainly take away from cancer is how valuable it is to me to be able to live my life.
I 1,000% agree with you. I 1,000% agree with you. That I mean, yeah. I mean, there's so many things we can't control. Um, it's a cliche, but we're all going to die.
Mhm.
But we can make a choice whether or not we want to live and how we want to live. And yeah, I agree with you. I think it's
And
important
COVID,
to go
yeah, I
ahead.
was just going to say that COVID sort of opened, I think, many healthy people's eyes about what it's like to live like us, where you have to by times be isolated, where there's times where you really aren't up to being outside, you really can't, or it's not good or whatever. And just this sort of mortality fear that cancer patients live with every day, people going, oh my God, I could get COVID and die, or my loved one might, my granny
Right.
might. That the idea is people are suddenly aware of their mortality in a way that cancer patients are always aware of it. So
That's a great point. Yeah, I hadn't really thought of that, but you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I think this has humbled a lot of people, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I'm really sad. We're all sad about what we've gone through in this country over the last several months. But yeah, I mean, we have to live our life. I'm determined every day to move my body, every day, um, because I know it helps. I'm determined every day to be more mindful of what I eat because I know it helps.
Is there
yeah,
another book in your future?
You know, I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking about a book on epiphanies, and I don't mean big epiphanies, but we all have small epiphanies in our life that we've encountered. And the genesis of the idea is I realized I wrote the book so quickly that I left out a couple of things, a couple of small epiphanies. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll write an essay. And instead, what I've thought about is,
oh,
say again?
you could be a blogger.
I blog, yeah, but I think what I'm going to do is try and get 10 or 15 writers to each write one or two epiphanies and then put together a compilation. I don't think people are going to want to read. I don't think people are going to want to read 20 epiphanies about me, but I think if it's one or
I would.
two, I don't know.
That would be
Yeah,
super interesting. That's a really great idea.
you haven't read it yet, so but I think if it's two each of 10 or 15 writers, that to me that's more interesting. So yeah, I'm thinking about it.
One great source for you would be Pat's podcast. She interviews all kinds of people who are the bump in the road and how they face it, and many of them are describing quite remarkable climbing Mount Everest kinds of things. So it's really
Yeah,
really
epiphanies. To me, an epiphany is like love. We can define it however we want. And the epiphanies for me are not like climbing Mount Everest, or it's learning about trust. It's learning about love. But again, that's just for me.
yes,
There could be any.
challenges, not the
Yeah.
ones. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But anyway, to answer your question, yeah, I'm thinking about it. It won't be easy. The first book, like I said, I knew the story. I lived the story. It was a matter of writing it from point A to point B. Writing a book on epiphanies or whatever I might choose to write about won't be as easy as the first book.
Well,
But
I'll
I
look
think I
forward
might
to
do it.
that. That sounds like an interesting book. Robin, what else do we have on tap for Cancer Road Trip? I mean, I'm
Uh,
sorry, for Cancer Book Club, sorry.
yeah, all the road trip, book club, read while we drive. No, don't do that. Yeah, so well, we'll have to sort that out. I guess we have a couple of possible other authors in the pipe. We haven't got someone solidly booked for November yet, but that I think you had some ideas, and so we will have to see if those people are free and available. But anyways, this has been it was great to read a book about someone defeating one of these super lethal, what people typically think of as a super lethal disease, and how you managed it and just were yourself.